Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is so great to have you with us. Today, we are opening up a stack of documents that, I have to be honest, when I first saw the titles, I thought, okay, this is going to be incredibly niche. We're looking at internal governance memos, theological essays, even court transcripts, and historical narratives from the International Society for Krishna Consciousness.
Which is better known to the world, and probably to you listening right now, as the Hare Krishna movement.
Exactly. And I think for most people, they hear that name and a very specific image comes to mind.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, saffron robes, chanting on street corners, maybe airports back in the 1970s.
That's the cultural footprint for sure.
But as I started reading through these sources, and we are talking about material ranging from very personal memoirs to, heavy-duty legal papers from as recently as 2025, I realized something pretty quickly. This isn't just a story about a religious institution.
No, it really isn't. Not at its core.
It's a story about power. It's a story about gender. It's about how you interpret the will of a really charismatic founder after they're gone.
Which is a universal problem.
It's a universal problem. And honestly, it's about that fundamental battle between maintaining a tradition and, adapting to the modern world. It feels like a succession drama, a legal thriller, and a theological debate all rolled into one.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's a classic institutional struggle. It just happens to be wearing saffron robes. The core conflict we're looking at today is very specific, though, and it is really heating up right now. It is the battle over whether women can serve as Dīkṣā-gurus within the movement.
Okay, we should probably define that right off the bat because the terminology here can get a little dense. We all kind of know what a guru is, generally a teacher, but what is a Dīkṣā-guru specifically?
Right, that's a crucial distinction. So in the Vaishnava tradition, which is the branch of Hinduism that Isai comes from, there are different types of gurus. You have Siksha-gurus or instructing gurus, and really anyone who gives you good spiritual advice can be a Siksha-guru. Your mom, a friend, a book.
Okay, so that's the informal instruction.
Exactly. But the Dīkṣā-guru is the initiating spiritual master. This is a much more formal, much heavier role. This is the person who formally accepts a disciple into the lineage. They give them their spiritual name, they give them their sacred mantras, and they fundamentally connect that person to the entire chain of masters, the parampara.
So this is not just a mentor. This is the person who holds the keys to the kingdom, in a way.
It is a position of immense spiritual authority and, frankly, institutional authority. The whole system is based on this. The disciple surrenders to the Dīkṣā-guru, and in return, the Dīkṣā-guru is said to take on the karma of the disciple. It's a lifelong, incredibly deep bond. And for decades within ISKCON, this specific role has been exclusively male.
Yeah. Exclusively male. But that changed recently. The governing body, the GBC, they decided to open this role to women. And that single change has triggered what I can only describe after reading these papers as a kind of theological civil war.
And we are not using that term lightly. When you look at the rhetoric in these documents, it is incredibly intense. It's not a polite debate. We have sources here accusing the current leadership of thievery, of literally stealing disciples. We have Supreme Court cases in India fighting over temple ownership worth, millions and millions of dollars. We have scholars explicitly warning of a schism, a literal fracture in the movement, where one side just picks up their ball and goes home.
It is extremely high stakes. And to understand it, we really have to look at the stack of sources we brought today. We have, I'd say, 3 distinct perspectives, and they really map out the entire battlefield.
Right. And we're going to take you, the listener, through this chronologically and, I guess, thematically. First, we're going to start with what I'm calling the heart.
We're looking at a book called What's a Woman to Do by Visakha Dasi. She's a direct disciple of the founder, Srila Prabhupada. So her work is very personal, it's historical, and it focuses on the original mood of the movement.
Okay, so we start with the heart, then we shift to the head. We have the SAC papers from 2005. That stands for the Sastric Advisory Council. This is the official body trying to find a scriptural basis to say, yes, women can be gurus.
But then we get the backlash, and this is fascinating. We have a collection of essays from the IISB, that's the ISKCON India Scholars Board, and these are dated from late 2025. These are the Traditionalists. And they are hitting back hard, arguing that allowing female gurus is a form of mission drift that will destroy the social order of the entire society. A theological fight. And then, just to make things even more complicated, we have the wild card. The IRM, the ISKCON revival movement. They're essentially standing outside the ring yelling, "You're all wrong." They don't think it should be men or women. They're fighting these huge legal battles in Indian courts arguing that the entire guru system, as it exists today, is illegitimate.
It is a lot to unpack. So yeah, our roadmap is simple. We are going to move from the emotional arguments to the dense theological ones, and finally to the existential threat that's facing this movement right now.
So let's start with the heart. Let's start with Visakha and her perspective.
Right. Visakha view is crucial because she was there. She joined in 1971. She was a photographer. She traveled extensively with the founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada. So her argument isn't, primarily about citing obscure Sanskrit verses to prove a legal point. It's about the mood of the teacher. It's about how it felt to be a woman in the movement when the founder was still alive.
And she uses this incredibly vivid image in her book that it really stuck with me, the image of the topiary.
Yes, the topiary. It's such a powerful metaphor.
For anyone who doesn't know, a topiary is when you take a bush or a tree, something that's living and wild, and you clip it. You force it to grow into a very specific artificial shape.
Like an elephant or a geometric ball or a spiral.
Exactly. It looks cool. It's very orderly, but it is completely artificial. The plant isn't growing naturally.
Right. And Visakha uses that as an analogy for what the institution, or at least a faction within it, has done to women. She argues that forcing women into these rigid, traditional social molds, saying you can only do this, you must be shy, you must be domestic, you cannot lead, is like making a topiary. You are stunting their natural growth. You're clipping off entire parts of their personality or their spiritual potential just to make them fit a preconceived shape that looks traditional.
She actually calls it a form of violence, which is a really strong word. She says preventing someone from serving God according to their natural propensities is a kind of violence against the soul.
And that connects to this core idea she pushes: empowerment versus disempowerment. Her argument is that Prabhupada, the founder, he wasn't a gardener trying to make topiaries. He was a gardener trying to let the plants grow as strong as they could. His management style, according to her account, was all about drawing out that spontaneous, loving spirit. So if a woman was good at photography, like she was, he said, take photos for Krishna. He didn't say, wait, that's a man's job.
Right.
If a woman was a good speaker, he said, go preach. He didn't say, hold on, you're a woman, put the camera down and go to the kitchen.
It sounds like he was incredibly pragmatic. Just, I need this work done. You have the talent, so go do it.
Pragmatic, absolutely, but also spiritually visionary. He saw the potential for service, not just the gender of the servant.
There's this amazing anecdote she tells about Yamuna Devi. And Yamuna Devi was, one of the early superstars of the movement, if we can even use that term. She's an incredible singer. She sang the prayers that are still played in every single temple worldwide every morning. She was a cook, a leader, a huge figure.
A very significant figure. A founding member, in essence. She was there from the very beginning in London.
So the story goes that Prabhupada is sitting with a group of his disciples, and he quotes this ancient proverb from a philosopher named Chanakya Pandit. And the proverb is, never trust a woman or a politician.
Which, let's be honest, is a heavy thing to hear from your spiritual master. Imagine sitting there in the 1970s, a young American woman who's given up everything for this movement, and you hear that.
Exactly. It must have landed with a thud. But Yamuna Devi, instead of getting offended or defensive, she just nods. She says, yes, Srila Prabhupada, that is true. She completely agrees with him. She accepts the cultural critique of the so-called female nature.
And this is the pivot point. This is where the whole story turns.
Prabhupada stops her. He looks her right in the eye and says, but you are not a woman. You are a Vaishnava.
That moment right there, that one line encapsulates the entire progressive argument in this whole debate. Because it brings in the concept of the spirit soul. The absolute fundamental philosophy of the Hare Krishna movement and Vedanta in general is that we are not these bodies. I am not a man, you are not a man, we are eternal spirit souls. So Visakha's argument is, if the core philosophy says we are not our bodies, why is the institution so obsessed with limiting us based on the specifics of our bodies?
You are not a woman. You are a Vaishnava.
Yeah.
It's like he was saying her spiritual identity completely superseded her gender identity. It wasn't that she was a good woman. It was that the category of woman didn't even apply to her anymore in that context.
Precisely. The spiritual identity transcended the material one. And Visakha, she reinforces this with scriptural examples too. She doesn't just rely on anecdotes. She brings up the story of the Nagapatnas.
The wives of the serpent. I remember reading that.
Yes. In the Krishna mythology, specifically in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's this story of a giant venomous serpent named Kaliya who is poisoning the Yamuna River. And Krishna, as a young boy, jumps into the river and starts dancing on Kaliya's many heads to punish him. And Kaliya's being crushed. He's dying. And who saves him?
The wives come out.
The Nagapatnis, his wives. They come out and they offer these beautiful, theologically sophisticated, high-level philosophical prayers to Krishna to beg for mercy for their husband. They display incredible wisdom and devotion.
So in this scenario, the wives are the smart ones. The husband is the powerful demon, the brute, and the wives are the theologians.
They are the devotees, they are the ones with the spiritual vision. And Visaga points this out to say, look, even in the ancient texts, you have clear examples where the husbands are demons or just, fools, and the wives are the spiritual authorities who have to instruct them. It sets a precedent that qualification for spiritual leadership is based on consciousness, what they call bhakti, not on the physical form.
But then we run right into this word, protection. This seems to be a huge trigger word in all these documents. The traditionalists love it. The progressives seem extremely wary of it. We see it everywhere. Women must be protected.
Protection is the battlefield. It really is. In the traditional Vedic culture that Isekon draws from, there is this maxim that a woman must always be under protection. In childhood by her father, in her youth by her husband, and in old age by her adult son.
Which sounds, to a modern ear, a lot like control. It sounds like you're being treated like property.
And that is exactly Visaka's point. She argues that the concept of protection has been weaponized. She says some men in the movement use protection as a synonym for suppression. So, I'm protecting you by keeping you out of leadership roles. I'm protecting you by not letting you speak on the altar because it might agitate the men.
She flips the definition, though.
Yeah.
She tries to reclaim that word.
She does, and it's a very clever argument. She redefines protection as facilitation. She uses the example of Prabhupada himself. In his later years, he was an old man. He needed help walking, he needed help eating, he needed protection in a physical sense. But did that mean his disciples stopped him from speaking? Did they stop him from leading a global movement because he was physically dependent?
No, of course not. They did the opposite. They helped him do those things because they were protecting him. They set up the microphone for him. They carried him to the stage.
Exactly. So she argues, if a woman needs social protection, whatever that means, that shouldn't mean barring her from being a guru. It should mean providing a safe and supportive environment for her to flourish as a guru. You don't protect a flower by locking it in a dark box. You protect it by giving it a stake to grow on so it can reach the sun.
That is a really compelling argument from the heart. It feels very in line with that vibe of the 60s and 70s expansion, that sort of all-hands-on-deck spirit. But now we have to pivot. We have to move from the heart to the head. Because the institution, the GBC, they didn't just make this decision based on vibes or feelings. They had to justify it scripturally.
And that brings us to the SAC paper from 2005, the Sastric Advisory Council.
Sastric, meaning relating to the Shastras or the scriptures.
Right. The GBC, the Governing Body Commission, basically tasked this council of scholars to look into the texts. They said, okay, put aside the feelings for a moment. Can we actually justify female gurus based on the books?
And reading this paper, you can really tell they are trying to thread a needle here. They are digging through centuries of texts to find a precedent, to find some justification.
They are looking for Shastric evidence, and they found a few key pillars for their argument. The biggest one is a historical figure named Janava Devi.
Who was she? What's her story?
She was the wife of Lord Nityananda. Now, in this tradition, Nityananda is seen as a direct manifestation of the divine, the brother of the avatar Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's a huge deal. After Nityananda passed away, his wife, Janava Devi, didn't just fade into the background. She became the leader of the entire community. The texts say she controlled the whole Vaishnava community. She presided over the great festivals, she settled theological disputes between the top male scholars, and most importantly for this debate, she initiated disciples.
And just to be crystal clear, she initiated male disciples.
She initiated male disciples. High-ranking, scholarly male disciples.
So the argument is pretty simple then. If she did it back then a woman can do it. It's not impossible. The precedent exists.
That is the Janava precedent. That's pillar number one. If the tradition allows for even one such exception, then the potential exists. But the SAC goes deeper. They quote a very, very famous verse from the Caitanya Charitamrita, which is like the central biography of the avatar Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
This is the Kibavipra verse I've seen mentioned.
Well, that's the one. Mada 8.128. It translates roughly to, whether one is a brahmana, a sannyasi, or a sudra, regardless of what he is, he can become a spiritual master if he knows the science of Krishna.
Regardless of what he is, that seems pretty open-ended. It sounds like a pure meritocracy.
The SAC argues that what he is refers to all bodily designations. Man, woman, high caste, low caste, it doesn't matter. The only qualification listed is knowing the science of Krishna ye Krishna Tattvaveda. If you know the truth, you can teach the truth. They see this verse as completely disconnecting the role of guru from the social caste system, which would include gender.
But, and there's always a but in these theological debates, especially in a tradition as old and complex as this one, the traditionalists have a countertext. They have a quote from Prabhupada himself about a woman named Suniti.
Right. This is the elephant in the room for the SAC paper. It's the big hurdle they have to clear. There is a purport, a commentary in the Srimad Bhagavatam where Prabhupada is writing about Suniti, who was the mother of a great child devotee named Dhruva. Suniti taught her son, she guided him, she gave him his first instructions. But Prabhupada writes very clearly that Suniti was his Siksha guru, the instructing guru, but she could not be his Diksha guru because she was a woman.
That seems like a slam dunk for the other side. She could not be his Diksha guru because she was a woman. It's explicit. It's right there in black and white in the founder's own commentary.
It looks that way on the surface, absolutely. So
Yeah.
the SAC has to do some serious hermeneutical gymnastics here. They have to explain this away. And they offer a few possibilities. One, they argue that this statement was specific to the context. Maybe it's because she was his mother and there's a specific social rule about mothers not formally initiating their own sons.
Okay, so it's a family thing, not a gender thing.
That's one argument. Another is that it was specific to the time period of the story. The story takes place in the Satya Yuga, a different cosmic age, where social rules were much, much stricter. They argue it wasn't a blanket ban for all time, especially when you weigh it against the more universal principle of the Keep a Vipra verse we just discussed, which seems to open the door for everyone.
So the SAC is basically saying, look at the broader principle of spiritual qualification. Don't get hung up on one very specific contextual rule from a different era.
Exactly. They are arguing for the spirit of the law over the letter of the law in that specific instance.
Okay, so that was 2005. That paper laid the groundwork. But now we fast forward 2 decades to 2025, and the backlash has arrived. In a big way, we have these essays from the ISB, and the tone of these documents. It is not compromising. It's not a polite disagreement.
Not at all. The ISB, the ISKCON India Scholars Board, represents a very strong and, it seems, growing faction within the movement, primarily based in India. And their core argument is that the 2005 SAC paper was a complete disaster. They accuse the GBC of mission drift.
Mission drift. That's a corporate term. It sounds like they're talking about a company that's lost its way.
It is, and that's intentional. They're arguing that ISKCON is capitulating to Western feminism. They believe the leaders are so afraid of looking sexist to the modern world, so afraid of being canceled or looking outdated, that they are willing to throw out the entire Vedic tradition or Satakara to do it.
And they go right back to the Manu Samhita. We touched on this with the protection idea, but the IISB really leans into it.
They treat the Manu Samhita, which is this ancient law book for mankind in Hinduism, as a kind of non-negotiable social constitution. And they quote that famous and very controversial line, "A woman is never independent."
Never independent. I mean, that is a hard pill to swallow in the 21st century.
In childhood, she's protected by the father, in youth by the husband, in old age by the son. Their logic follows from this premise. They say, what is a Diksha guru? A Diksha guru is an independent spiritual authority. A guru tells the disciple what to do, the disciple surrenders to the guru. If a woman becomes a guru, she by definition takes a position of command. She becomes a master. But if she is never independent, according to Manu, how can she be a master? It creates a social and theological paradox that they say is untenable.
So they are arguing that spiritual equality is a real thing. Your soul can go back to Godhead. You can be a pure soul. But while you're in this material world, in this body, you have to follow the social hierarchy.
Exactly. They make a clear distinction between the spiritual platform and the social platform. They argue that your spiritual attainment doesn't just negate your social duty. You can be a pure devotee and still have to act like a traditional woman, just like you can be a pure devotee and still have to obey the traffic laws or the laws of gravity. They see the social structure as a divine law, not just a cultural habit that you can change.
There is also a very technical argument they make about something called the sacred thread. This got a little dense in the reading, but it seems really important to their case. Can you break that down for us?
Right. This is what I call the Brahman technicality. It's a key part of their argument against the mechanics of it. In the Vedic tradition, to perform certain high-level priestly duties, specifically the fire sacrifice that happens during an initiation, you need to be an initiated Brahmana. And the external sign of a male brahmana is the sacred thread, the upavita, which is worn over the shoulder.
Okay. And women don't get the thread.
Traditionally, no. In ISKCon today, qualified women do get second initiation, which is the Brahminical initiation, but they do not physically receive the sacred thread, and they don't chant the Brahma Gayatri mantra in the same way that the men do. So the IISB argues, if you don't have the thread and you don't have the specific mantra, you don't have the post, it's a technical requirement for the job.
It sounds like a kind of bureaucratic or ritualistic technicality, but for them it's a structural impossibility. It's like trying to be a pilot without a pilot's license.
Precisely. They view it as a hard and fast rule, and they accuse the SAC and the GBC of just ignoring these rules to be nice or modern. In their papers, they claim the 2005 paper made unsubstantiated false claims and engaged in the nullification of Prabhupada's instructions. They are essentially saying the leadership knowingly misrepresented the scripture to push a progressive social agenda. They see it as a complete degradation of the standard for what a guru is.
And that brings us to this big debate over the concept of TPC, time, place, and circumstance. The progressives, like Visakha, are constantly saying we have to adapt to the time, place, and circumstance. We're in the 21st century West, not ancient India. What do the traditionalists say to that?
The traditionalists, the IISB, they acknowledge TPC. They're not naive. They know Prabhupada made adjustments. He let women live in the temples with unmarried men. He let everyone eat together, things that were totally unheard of and scandalous in traditional India at the time. But the ISB argues there is a line, a very important line.
A line between adjustment and fabrication.
That's the perfect way to phrase it. They say you can adjust the details of the tradition, but you cannot change the core principles. And for them, the gender hierarchy within the social structure is a core principle, not a changeable detail. So they argue that creating female Dīkṣā-gurus isn't an adjustment. It's crossing the line from practical application into fabricating new doctrine that goes against the founder's will.
So you have this classic battle, the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. Adaptation versus purity.
And usually these kinds of debates, they happen in faculty lounges or in debating halls. You write a paper, I write a rebuttal, maybe we have tea. But in ISKCon, this is spilling out into something much, much bigger. And that's because there is a third very disruptive player in this game.
The IRM, the ISKCon revival movement.
Yes. Just when you think it's a straightforward binary fight, the progressives versus the traditionalists, the IRM walks in and says, a plague on both your houses, you're both thieves.
This was the most shocking part of the research for me. I really thought the entire debate was, can women be gurus? And the IRM comes along and says, nobody can be a guru except Prabhupada.
This is the Ritvik argument, and to really understand the high stakes of this whole conflict, you have to understand this concept. They believe that just before Prabhupada passed away in 1977, he established a very specific system for the future. He sent out a letter appointing some of his senior men to act as Ritviks. A Ritvik is an officiating priest. Their job, according to the IRM, was to initiate new disciples on behalf of Prabhupada, not to become gurus themselves.
So wait, even after his physical death, according to their philosophy, if I join ISKCon today, my guru is Prabhupada. The person doing the ceremony is just a proxy, an agent.
Exactly, like a notary public. The notary witnesses you signing the contract, but the contract is with the bank, not the notary. The IRM argues that as soon as Prabhupada died, the leaders he appointed hijacked the movement. They turned themselves from Ritviks into full-blown gurus. They started accepting their own disciples, their own worship. The IRM source we have explicitly, repeatedly, calls this thievery. They say these men stole the disciples that rightfully belonged to Prabhupada.
So how do they view this whole female guru debate? Do they even care?
Oh, they care, but in a very, very cynical way. They look at the whole debate over female gurus and they call it equal opportunity thievery.
Wow. That is a scathing take.
It is. They look at the GBC and they say, oh, isn't that nice? After 50 years of men stealing disciples, you've decided to be progressive and let women steal disciples too. They mock the entire premise of the debate. To them, it doesn't matter if the thief is a man or a woman. They are both unauthorized. The whole system is corrupt from the root.
So they are weaponizing the chaos of this debate.
They are absolutely using the FDG, the female Dīkṣā-guru debate, to prove their larger point that the current leadership has completely lost the plot. They say, look at this mess you've created. You're fighting over the gender of the guru when you shouldn't even have gurus at all. They position themselves as the only ones who are actually loyal to the founder's final order.
And this isn't just, some angry guys on an internet forum. This is happening in the Supreme Court of India.
This is where it gets very real, very fast. We have sources discussing these long-running, incredibly expensive legal battles between Mumbai ISK-Con, which is the mainstream GBC-aligned group, and Bengaluru ISK-Con.
Bengaluru ISK-Con is huge, right? The Hare Krishna Hill temple there is famous.
It is massive. It's one of the most financially successful and well-managed temples in the entire world, and it's run by a man named Madhu Pandit Das, who is a staunch supporter of this Ritvik philosophy. He refuses to accept the GBC's authority or their appointed gurus. So Mumbai ISK-Con sued them. They said, you are using our brand, you're using Prabhupada's name, but you aren't following our rules. Give us the temple.
It's like a franchise war. Imagine if McDonald's corporate sued a rogue franchisee who decided the Big Mac should have 3 patties instead of 2.
But the Big Mac here is the path to salvation. The stakes are infinite, and the assets are very, very finite and very valuable. The source mentions a split verdict in the Supreme Court. It's been in legal limbo for years, but the fact that it is in court at all shows that the theological fracture has become a physical, legal fracture. It's about assets, real estate, and money, all driven by this fundamental question of who is the guru?
And meanwhile, the IISB, the traditionalists, are explicitly threatening a similar kind of split. They warn in their papers that pushing female gurus forward will lead to a separation from the GBC.
So now you can see the whole map. You have the IRM, who have already separated ideologically and are fighting in court for the physical assets. You have the traditionalists, who are threatening to walk away and take their temples with them if women become gurus. And you have the progressives, who feel that if women aren't allowed to be gurus, the movement will become a cultish, irrelevant relic that betrays the founder's compassionate spirit.
The introduction of female-dīkṣā-gurus acts as this perfect wedge. It's cracking the whole thing open.
The GBC is constantly trying to maintain unity in diversity. That's their official slogan. But how do you maintain unity when you have 3 powerful groups all reading the same books and coming to completely contradictory conclusions about the most fundamental aspect of the faith? It seems almost impossible.
Okay, so let's try to bring this all together for a moment. We started with Vaisakadasi talking about compassion, about the topiary, about not crushing people's innate spiritual propensities. It sounded so reasonable. Let women serve according to their capacity.
Then we jumped into the heads of the theologians. The SAC said, the scripture allows it. Look at Jonavadevi. Look at the Kiba Vipra verse. And the ISB shot back. Tradition forbids it. Look at Manu. Look at the sacred thread.
And then the IRM, the wild card, just overturns the whole table and says, you're all unauthorized. Only Prabhupada is the guru. You're fighting over stolen property.
It all comes down to a crisis of authority. It is the classic problem that every single major movement faces. In the absence of the founder Acharya, in the absence of the one person who had the final, unquestionable word, how does a movement decide what is absolute truth and what is just cultural baggage?
When Prabhupada was alive, he could just say, do this. And that was it.
And they did it. He could even contradict himself. He could, quote, protect women from Manu Samhita on a Tuesday, and then on Wednesday make a woman a temple president over all the men, and it was fine. Because he was the guru. He was the living dynamism. He could read the person, not just the rule book.
But now, all they have are the transcripts, the books, the audio tapes. And it seems like everyone is just cherry-picking the quote that supports their pre-existing bias.
That's what it looks like from the outside. The progressives pick the "you are not this body" and spirit soul quotes. The traditionalists pick the social order and Manu Samhita quotes. The Ritviks pick the letter to the GBC from July 9th, 1977. They are all looking at the same elephant, but one is describing a rope, one a tree trunk, and one a wall.
So for you, the listener, why does this matter? Most people listening are not Hare Krishnas. Why should you care about this, saffron-clad internal drama?
It matters because this is the predictable life cycle of every great movement, religious or secular. It happened in early Christianity. Think of the Protestant Reformation. It happened in Buddhism after the Buddha's passing. It happens in political parties when a powerful leader steps down. You have a charismatic founder who holds everything together through their own personality. Then they die. And the followers are left with a huge question. Do we preserve the fire of the mission, or do we just end up worshiping the ashes of the past?
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Do we keep the spirit of the movement alive by adapting, which is what Vaisakadasi wants, or do we keep the structure of the movement alive by freezing it in time, which is what the IISB wants?
It's that classic question. Can a tradition remain pure if it doesn't adapt to the world around it? But if it adapts too much, does it cease to even be the same tradition anymore?
Exactly. If asserting becomes a fully egalitarian, liberal religious movement that's indistinguishable from, say, Unitarianism, has it lost its unique Vedic offering? On the other hand, if it becomes a rigid, misogynistic sect that ignores the spiritual potential of half its member, has it lost its compassionate soul?
It's the guru paradox.
It is a paradox with no easy answer.
I just want to leave our listener with one final thought, something that really struck me while reading the ISB papers specifically.
Yeah.
We are talking about a philosophy that is famous above all else for one central teaching. You are not the body.
Aham Brahmasmi, I am spirit. It's the foundation of everything.
Right. On the spiritual platform, there is no male, no female, no black, no white, no American, no Indian. There is only the soul. And yet, the fiercest, most expensive, most schismatic, and most damaging battles in this spiritual movement are being fought entirely over the gender of the physical body.
The irony is, it's overwhelming.
If the ultimate goal is to transcend the body, why is the institution so utterly obsessed with defining who can do what based on the body? Is the body a vehicle for the soul, or is it a cage?
And maybe the more important question for the movement's future is, can the institution survive the answer to that question?
A huge thank you for helping us unpack this incredibly dense and fascinating topic.
It was my pleasure. A lot to think about.
And thank you for taking the deep dive. We'll see you next time.